did everything go wrong with Kody Brown? For years, Sister Wives fans saw the Browns dance the fine line of plural marriage, massive homes, and the ever-present glare of reality television. We laughed at their shenanigans, winced at the fights, and marveled or occasionally sympathized with the compromises the wives made. But off-camera, a tempest was building, and now, as Our Plural Path uncovers, the veil has been torn away. A court ruling released this week has rocked the world of Sister Wives, forcing Kody Brown's Flagstaff mansion, the residence that symbolized his patriarchal dominance and fiscal control, to be sold under an involuntary court mandate, not as a willing decision or an easy fiscal mistake, but as the culmination of years of courtroom combat, backroom financial transactions, and family breakdowns covered up in plain sight. Picture watching a family fight on television over money issues only to discover the very man brokering these fights might have been staging them for profit. And the mansion, once a bulwark of his power and influence, has now become the ultimate emblem of his downfall, leaving fans to ask how it got to this point and what it means for the future of the Browns, the wives, and the empire Kody built on control and secrecy. In this ongoing story, Our Plural Path peels back the layers, exposing the legal maneuvers, revealing shocking testimonies, and following every twist as the courtroom drama unfolds. Because each dollar, each choice, each betrayal counts. And this is far from the end. Indeed, the deeper we go, the more we see the domino effect of this forced sale on Robyn, on Kody, on Meri, Christine, Janelle, and the entire Brown clan, as the fallout is already changing the dynamics fans believed they knew. To understand the forced sale, we step back several years behind the scenes of the family's on-screen fights over property ownership, where discrepancies in finance could only be untangled by a court, beginning with Meri Brown, Kody's first wife, quietly asking questions about financial choices that gradually grew more explosive as mortgage payments, mysterious transfers, and use of family money were dodged, or so Kody led everyone to think. But as detailed by exhaustive legal discovery, Kody's use of the family estate was not only negligent, but manipulative with all spending, property choices, and signatures called into question. And when the legal documents, once sealed, were made public, it became apparent how big this really was. Secret debt, fraudulent claims of ownership, and unexplainable transactions directly linked to Kody's name, transforming the beautiful estate into a focal point of a legal chess game he could not win. At the same time, Robyn Brown, Kody's fourth wife, though not accused of anything untoward, was swept into the web of law simply because she was part of the property. Her responses in court described as running the gamut from frustration to shock and throwing gasoline on an already fiery situation. This was no average lawsuit. The court's investigation was meticulous, peeling back layers of financial mismanagement fans had never seen. And with each new discovery, the pressure increased legally and emotionally for every Brown family member, setting the stage for a climax no one, least of all Kody, expected as the courtroom crackled with tension from the opening proceedings. No cameras allowed, but observers likened it to an electric atmosphere where family members, friends, and lawyers sat as testimony began, each one more telling than the last. Meri Brown's quiet but assertive testimony laid out a timeline of money, choices highlighting inconsistencies and unexplained deposits that painted a pattern of Kody's financial control, leaving no question remaining. Then Robyn Brown's cross-examination, although she was not the main target, disclosed communications with Kody about property choices, payments, and agreements that contradicted earlier assertions made on television, sending whispers through the courtroom. The game changer was the family's own accountant with documents, bank statements, and ledgers in hand describing large amounts of money moved in ways that could not be explained. The evidence, in a word, overwhelming, leading court observers to say this testimony alone could compel a court-ordered sale. Kody's defensive and visibly agitated responses failed to refute the accumulating evidence, as it became apparent the court was not merely hearing family disputes, but examining minute accounting of mismanagement. A cliffhanger moment for the public who had long wondered how Kody managed the finances only to see the court's painstaking examination open eyes to a reality far removed from reality television soap. The stakes no longer theoretical but real, quantifiable, and directly aimed at the mansion. After closing testimonies, the judge indicated a recess. Legal observers surmising the next hearing could determine if Kody could keep the mansion or face forced sale as tensions boiled over both in the courtroom and among spectators. Insiders disclosing Kody was visibly agitated off record, his characteristic calm replaced by frustration and desperation, indicating the mansion, the family's symbol of stability, was in peril, while Meri and other family members processed the drama differently. Some worried about the emotional effect on the children, while others considered the financial implications. Because the house was not simply a residence, but years of investments, family history, and public persona. Its loss both a financial and symbolic blow. Kody brainstormed with legal counsel in chaotic meetings, poring over paperwork hoping for a loophole to stall the sale. But each review only solidified the court's evidence, heating up public scrutiny as social media fans analyzed each report wondering what Kody would do next. Some defending him and others predicting the sale was inevitable. Publicity placing another level of pressure on Kody's personal and family issues, and making them public affairs as the remaining family members. Robyn and Meri included coped with their relationships to Kody. As the court resumed, Kody's lawyers launched a last-ditch defense arguing that certain financial deals were mischaracterized or misrepresented. But the judge's proof, accounting ledgers, bank statements, extensive transaction records, left little to the imagination, especially when the court unveiled how large money transfers believed to be presents to family members were actually recorded as personal incomes, sending ripples of incredulity through onlookers and anxious looks among even Kody's backers as the defense crumbled under its own weight. Meri and others sitting silently with stoic faces, but insiders later disclosing Meri was mentally preparing for post-sale life, realizing the mansion was a symbol of power and domination, while Robyn looked visibly stressed, whispering nonstop with advisors, perhaps realizing the evidence questioned her position in the finances. Rumors spread that the mansion was going to be sold as the judge's sharp remarks focused on differences in accounting statements and the integrity of witnesses, making clear the mansion's destiny was no longer about money but legal culpability. Every piece of evidence reinforcing the argument for a forced sale and making Kody's defense appear desperate. Media coverage outside amplifying the intensity as fans and critics debated Kody's actions and speculated on how the family would adapt. Hashtags exploding as the forced sale became inevitable. Kody's response, a combination of overt frustration and covert scheming, suggested he would try other measures to stall or negotiate, but the melodrama overflowed into Brown family dynamics in a very public manner, and as the truth of the forced sale hit home, feelings ran high and years of pent-up tensions emerged. Meri, usually the quiet spectator, displayed an uncommon blend of relief and resolve, feeling vindicated that Kody's spending had disproportionately burdened her and the other wives, secretly planning to ensure her family's economic security after the sale, while Robyn was clearly distraught, frantically searching for last-minute legal strategies, but obviously backed into a corner by the evidence. Kody's reaction was frustration, incredulity, and rage, slamming his fist during closed-door meetings and pacing courthouse halls, grappling with the reality that the mansion, a testament to his power, was slipping away, a loss not only of money, but of dominance and public image. Though the children's names were not formally in the papers, sources said discussions of future living situations, emotional support, and public image became pressing issues, making an already dramatic situation more complicated. Social media chatter heightening the stakes as fans argued over Kody's management style and Robyn's supposed control. Viral videos of testimony adding pressure for public responses. On the final day, it was evident this was not just a matter of money, but a family comeuppance. The coercive sale not merely a technical consequence, but a milestone that could recast relationships, alliances, and the Brown family's public life for years to come. Tension palpable as lawyers made their final submissions, and the judge's demeanor implied the ruling would not favor Kody. Legal commentators afterward calling it a masterclass in courtroom drama, with each word picked apart and streamed online for fans clamoring for every morsel of information. Kody testified again, his voice shaking as he tried to justify previous actions, before not just the court, but searing media scrutiny, contending the mansion was a family resource to be shared equally, but cross-examination revealing inconsistencies in documents showing investments and expenditures disproportionately impacting Meri and the other wives, while Robyn's attorneys tried a last-ditch appeal playing up her mothering role, but the judge In the aftermath of the forced sale, the Brown family entered an uneasy period of transition, one that felt less like rebuilding and more like reassembling fragile pieces under scrutiny, and Our Plural Path now guides us through this next chapter. With the mansion gone, each wife, each child, and Kody himself had to confront new financial realities, shifting power dynamics and public expectations that now demanded authentic accountability rather than curated narratives. Robyn, though not implicated in the financial misdeeds, found herself walking a tightrope, balancing loyalty to her husband against protecting her children's future and signaling to fans that she, too, would no longer be complicit in secrecy. So she began quietly working with legal counsel and financial advisors to restructure trust arrangements, ensure transparency in asset division, and press for clarity in how the remaining proceeds would be allocated, all while publicly emphasizing unity and stability for the children amid chaos. Meri, once the mild-mannered first wife, emerged with renewed resolve, stepping into a more outspoken role in demanding that every transaction tied to the mansion and other family properties be audited, pushing for third-party oversight and refusing behind-closed-door deals that lacked documentation, gradually transforming from a quiet skeptic into a vocal advocate for economic equity for women in plural families. Christine and Janelle, each with their own wounds from the dissolution of the plural union, navigated their separations with the sale as a pivotal turning point. Christine, having already relinquished her portion earlier, struggled with how her identity had been wrapped up in that shared empire, now looking inward at her own values and how she would define family without that anchor, while Janelle dug into past financial records, re-examining every investment she had made under the Brown umbrella, pushing legal teams to revisit promises and undocumented reimbursements, sometimes sparring with Robyn and other wives over what was owed. As these women asserted their rights, the children became silent witnesses to a drama of ownership and legacy, some old enough to ask sharp questions in private, others grappling with displacement and uncertainty, and all of them forced to carry forward a new sense of home that no longer lay in one grand building, but in shifting foundations of trust, communication, and redefined family. Kody, chastened and cornered, attempted to negotiate with public statements of humility and purported willingness to cooperate, offering to participate in asset reviews and expressing regret for opacity. Yet fans and analysts noted in interviews that his language never fully embraced admission of wrongdoing. He framed mistakes as mismanagement, not malfeasance, and this distinction became the fault line in post-sale narratives, with many perceiving it as an attempt to salvage reputation more than to fully account for damages. Internally, family therapy sessions were convened, though skeptics questioned their effectiveness, noting that while emotional wounds resurfaced, anger, betrayal, grief, the practical wounds of debt, legal judgment, and lost collateral might never be fully healed by counseling alone. Our Plural Path foregrounds the significance of that distinction. Public redemption must be matched by private remediation, meaning newly drawn budgets, stricter financial oversight, and clear division of assets, all while rebuilding communal bonds. As the sale funds began to be distributed, after paying off lingering liens, taxes, and court fees, tensions erupted over what counts as shared investment versus individual contribution, with the wives' legal teams poring over ledgers line by line, disputing past reimbursements, renovation costs, and maintenance expenses, and occasionally leaking select portions of the disputes to media outlets to sway public opinion. To stabilize their image, the Browns under Our Plural Path carefully orchestrated controlled family statements, timing announcements with interviews, releasing sanitized narratives of new beginnings, framing the sale as painful but necessary, and signaling a pivot from spectacle to sincerity. Yet critics watched closely for inconsistencies between rhetoric and court records. Meanwhile, the children's lives adjusted, some relocating to new homes, shifting schools, redefining their identities outside the grand mansion, and in subtle ways becoming more involved in family decisions, calling for inclusion in discussions that previously had been hidden. Forced by their proximity to the financial collapse to grow up faster, Robyn and Meri in particular became staunch advocates for the kids' voices in future decisions. Financially, the Brown clan restructured. Luxury had to give way to pragmatism, and the pricing of smaller homes, revenue-producing assets, and debt refinancing became central. Robyn quietly moved some belongings into a modest property she already owned, turning it into a legal and emotional safe house for her children, while Meri began investing independently in businesses she controlled, refusing further entanglement. Beyond the immediate family, the fall of the mansion reverberated outwards. Media commentary discussed precedent for reality stars mismanaging collective wealth. Legal observers speculated on whether courts may be more willing to mandate asset liquidation in high-profile divorce disputes. Fans debated the moral of the story, that glamour can mask rot, and that plural marriage requires radical transparency. In subsequent public appearances, Robyn and Meri separately spoke about lessons learned, about shared financial governance, open books, and the importance of autonomy within relational structures, planting seeds for Our Plural Path's vision of plural marriage grounded in mutual accountability rather than central dominance. And as the dust of the sale settled, the Browns found themselves in an altered topology of power. No longer could one person quietly dominate finances. Instead, joint consent and documentation became non-negotiable, every major purchase henceforth requiring co-signatures and outside audits. Memory loomed. Old arguments and resentment resurfaced, but so did new respect, as each wife had to confront her own complicity in silence and reclaim agency. Over months and years, relationships shifted. Some alliances between wives deepened, especially around protecting the children, while some ties frayed permanently. Kody's role in the family became less architect and more participant, stripped of unilateral control, forced to rebuild trust through actions rather than declarations. And though the man lost the mansion, the legacy he built nevertheless left behind structures still in flux. Investments, properties, debts, emotional claims that would need ongoing negotiation. Through it all, Our Plural Path stands not as spectator, but as narrator. Charting how the Brown family's post-sale journey is not just about what happens next, but about how we reimagine plural marriage itself. Not as a patriarchal empire, but as shared stewardship of lives, assets, and trust. In time, perhaps the Browns will emerge with new equilibrium, more tempered, more cautious, more conscious, or perhaps fractures will remain irreparable. Either way, the sale of the mansion was not an ending, but a turning point, and Our Plural Path continues to follow each step, each decision, each alliance, each redemption, each fracture. Because in the rebuilding lies the true story of power, accountability and plural love. Accountability and plural love. With the sale behind them and the first painful months of adjustment over, the Brown saga shifted again into an uncharted phase, one that Our Plural Path calls the reckoning of reinvention. Because now, without a mansion to anchor or a court date looming, the real work of rebuilding began in private living rooms, small rental houses, and on legal conference calls where lawyers and financial planners replaced the cameras and bright lights. Kody Brown, once the architect of a sprawling plural household, found himself living more like a tenant than a patriarch, shuttling between modest spaces and trying to persuade wives and children that he was ready to change, but in practice, clinging to old habits of control and secrecy that repeatedly derailed attempts at reconciliation. Robyn, who had been both shield and lightning rod during the legal fight, became the de facto head of crisis management, splitting her time between stabilizing her own household and coaching her older kids through online harassment, while behind closed doors, quietly urging Kody to finally sign off on a binding transparency agreement drafted by the wives' attorneys, a document that would force open books, separate household budgets, and independent trustees for any shared assets. Meri, emboldened by the courtroom victory, pressed further into advocacy and entrepreneurship, using Our Plural Path as a platform to talk about financial literacy for women in plural families, and publicly vowing never again to co-sign anything without third-party oversight. A message that resonated with viewers who had followed the saga from day one. Janelle and Christine, though no longer under Kody's roof, each took part in periodic family summits moderated by neutral facilitators, hashing out co-parenting schedules, the sale of smaller lots still in the family name, and, more tentatively, the emotional debris of years spent suppressing doubts about Kody's management. The children, for their part, began to assert their own narratives, some speaking anonymously to bloggers about the dissonance between the public show and private reality, others posting on social media about the freedom and pain of living outside the mansion's shadow, all of which fed back into the swirling online discourse that Our Plural Path documented in real time. Financially, the post-sale world forced uncomfortable reckonings. Tuition bills, medical expenses, and day-to-day living now had to be met without a single pooled account. And the wives discovered both the relief and the burden of autonomy. Relief in knowing no one could drain their accounts without consent. Burden in having to shoulder full responsibility for costs once diffused across the group. Emotionally, the family split into two camps. One believing in cautious reconciliation and shared traditions, the other ready to cut ties completely and rebuild solo. In public appearances, Kody tried to rebrand himself as a chastened leader learning humility, but critics pointed to fresh inconsistencies. Promotional deals signed in his name alone, vague answers about outstanding debts that undermined the redemption arc. Robyn, weary of the endless scrutiny, began crafting her own independent narrative focusing on her children's education and stability, signaling to fans that her first loyalty now lay inward, not to preserving Kody's image. Meri, meanwhile, deepened her partnership with advocacy groups, appearing on podcasts and webinars to discuss transparency, agency, and healing from financial betrayal in plural marriages, making her not just a former first wife, but a spokesperson for a new model of plural partnership grounded in accountability. As these separate trajectories unfolded, Our Plural Path framed the saga not as a soap opera, but as a case study in how hidden financial structures can corrode even the most publicly celebrated relationships, and how women can reclaim power by demanding clarity. By mid-year, the Browns' new normal looked nothing like the polished series that introduced them to America. Smaller homes, separate bank accounts, legal agreements, rotating therapy sessions, and a growing cadre of adult children who no longer feared speaking out. Yet in that unglamorous grind lay the first real chance at authenticity. And so Part 3 closes not with a dramatic courtroom twist, but with the quieter drama of everyday choices. Kody signing, at last, the transparency agreement. Robyn enrolling her youngest in a school far from tabloid cameras. Meri launching a financial literacy livestream under the Our Plural Path banner. Janelle finalizing her own home purchase without a single Brown co-signature. Christine opening up about her journey from silence to autonomy. Each step small on its own, but together sketching the outline of a family learning, painfully and publicly, to live without illusions.